Just came through earnings season for the big Canadian banks, and the numbers were pretty strong. What's the implication, though, here for lending to members of the indigenous community and impact on their economic activity? We're joined by Tracee Smith, CEO and founder of Keewaywin. Great to see you once again. So you're a private fund that advances money to indigenous communities to build housing. That's your core.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, there's a huge need, obviously, for housing in this country. And there's more and more private money that wants to influence that. What we're seeing right now is communities coming to us with an overwhelming frustration with not being able to access capital at the banks across the country. So hence the need to set up a fund like this to fill that gap.
But we won't get bogged down on this, but excuse me, a bank, though, it can't do normal mortgage lending to people on a reserve under the Indian Act.
You can't mortgage reserve land, right? But there's other ways around that through term loans. So there is other ways to get that security. What we're seeing with various communities across the country is the frustration is around, really the banks not having the capacity to lend. So this goes towards training and capacity development at the bank level to make these kinds of loans. What we're finding is a lot of lenders in these institutions just don't have, enough involvement or direct community experience to know how a First Nation really runs. So they end up just walking away from these kinds of deals and leaving the community with no capital to go and do business.
And there's a lack of information. You say there's no real breakdown from the banks of their lending to Indigenous people.
Yeah, that's the thing. The banks had, someone like RBC had $5 billion in profits this quarter, but there's no report on their Indigenous business, right? The banks act very siloed. They silo their Indigenous business from personal commercial lending to the wealth management to trust. So you don't really have a good grasp of their Indigenous business because they probably don't either. It's really important to start looking at Indigenous business at these banks as its own segment.
Royal, apparently, RBC just launched a no-fee banking option for Indigenous individuals. Is that a step forward?
It is, but at the same time, it's hard to reconcile when you have third quarter results of $5 billion and you're offering a no-fee bank account. When the communities I meet with and the people I've worked with over my entire career, it's really probably one of the first times I've heard that there's been a need or a want for a no-fee bank account for Indigenous people. There's a lot more bigger nuts to crack, and this is probably quite low on the totem pole in terms of wanting, access to capital in this area.
The First Nations Bank is an Indigenous-focused lender, and it just sold a stake of almost 10% in itself. Who can you give us a bit of background? Who was the buyer, for example?
Yeah, the Lytle Tene First Nation, they're out west, and this is a great move. I think this is really a great opportunity for more First Nations to become owners of First Nations Bank, let alone any other financial institution. You have owners of the bank, they're going to make sure that they're going to be lent to, right? They're going to make sure that the strategic vision of First Nations Bank is going to be at the utmost priority. So this is a great move on their end, and I encourage more and more First Nations to become buyers into a bank like that, so that you can get more money flowing through these communities.
And give us an update on Keewaywin. You just raised about $11 million.
Yeah, no, we're flooded with requests, and again, it goes to the lending cycle of banks. Takes quite long to get a loan from a bank, so we're seeing a lot of demand for our capital. We're probably oversubscribed in the capital that we have, just in terms of, we probably have upwards of $200 million of demand for capital and for housing. Housing. Yeah, so specifically just for housing. So we probably won't meet that demand with Fund 1, but definitely with Fund 2, when we have sites on that, we'll be able to, raise more capital to meet that kind of demand.
And what sort of investors, or where did you raise this $11 million from?
So these investors are, all over. We have family offices coming into the fund. We have Rally Assets, Addenda Capital. These are all impact investors that want to really affect Indigenous housing. So I think you're going to see more and more traditional institutions coming into funds like this, because this is really the way things are moving towards.
Do you offer any retail products like GICs or something? Because you think the public, members of the public, would be interested in that?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been asked to, start bonds and, start different kinds of products, and that's definitely on the horizon. But yeah, there's definitely a need and a want for a variety of products to come into an investment like this.
And your money that you lend for housing, is it just on reserves, or is it people living outside?
It's majority on reserve,
Right.
because the crisis is so bad in these communities. But we do look at off reserve opportunities as well.
Tracee, thanks for giving us that perspective.
Thank you.
Tracee Smith, founder and CEO of Keewaywin.